Hey boys and girls, I'm trying to light my altar here, get it going with fire. I'm trying to do it with my mind. It's not working. Maybe instead of blowing it out, I'll it in. No. Hang on. That would have been a lot easier with hands. But don't worry, Elijah starts a fire without hands and without a lighter. Welcome to story time. Hey kids, and welcome to story time. So glad that you're here. I've moved since I did the last one, and things are a little bit different where I'm sitting, but I'm still sharing my favorite Old Testament stories. Today, I'm telling you about Elijah. Elijah was a prophet, one of the most famous prophets in the Bible. A prophet is someone who takes a message from God and gives it to God's people. So if you tell God's people, God loves you, you're kind of a prophet. But Elijah had some very specific things to say. One day God said, go and tell Ahab, Ahab was the king, go and tell Ahab that I'm not going to send any more rain. I don't like what he's doing in my land with my people, and I'm not going to send any more rain. So Elijah goes marching up to the palace, up to the king, and says, Ahab, there's going to be no more rain. And Ahab was like, okay, whatever. I'll be fine. But then Elijah left, and it didn't rain the next day, and it didn't rain the day after that, and it didn't rain the day after that, and things started to dry up. And God said, Elijah, why don't you go hide out for a little while? You know, it might not be safe for you around here. And besides, there's not going to be a lot of food. There's not going to be a lot of water. So go by this brook and just stay there, and you can drink the water from the brook. And when you're hungry or it's dinner time, I'll send you some food on some ravens. I know, where'd that come from? Elijah in the Old Testament got food delivered. It's like he called up Grubhub. Hello, I need some food. And the ravens would be like, hey, we'll work for Grubhub. And they'll fly out and they'll find Elijah and give him the food while he's sitting by the brook. Well, that worked pretty well. The trouble is, I don't know if you know what happens to brooks when it stops raining. I mean, they'll flow for a while, but then they'll run out of water. And so when the brook dried up, God says, okay, you're going to have to move. Why don't you go to Zarephath? And there's going to be a widow there. Ask her for something to drink and for something to eat. So Elijah goes trotting off to Zarephath, and he finds this widow, and he says, could you give me something to drink? And the widow goes, okay, I can give you something to drink. And then Elijah's like, can you give me something to eat? And the widow's like, that's a little more tricky. You see, I have some food here. I was going to cook it, and my son and I were going to eat that, and then, well, we don't have any more food after that, so we just thought we'd lie down and die. But you know, hey, if you want our last meal, and Elijah, who knew what God said and was following God's instructions, said, yeah, I'll take your last food, which isn't very gentlemanly. But Elijah trusted God. So the widow's like, well, one more meal. I guess what difference does it make? I'll give my last meal to the prophet. And so he ate and went to bed. And the widow of Zarephath and her son lay down to die. But they woke up the next morning because, you know, it was just one night. And there was more food. Enough for the day. So Elijah and the widow and her son ate, and they went to bed, and they woke up the next day, and there was some more food. So they ate that. Elijah, the widow, and her son, they ate that, and that was all the food they had. But the next morning when they woke up, there was more food. And that kept happening for a long time, for years actually, till God came back and said, it's time for you to go find Ahab the king. I'd like to have a little chat with you all. So Elijah packs his thing and wanders back down to where the king lives. And he's in the woods and he comes across Obadiah, which is a great name. It's like you're warming up for a choir. Obadiah, Yabaya, B-O. Oh, it starts better than it finishes. But Obadiah was also a prophet of God, and he protected prophets because Ahab's wife, Jezebel, she liked to kill God's prophets. So Obadiah would hide them in caves. And he came across Elijah and fell on his face and says, "You're Elijah." And Elijah goes, "Yeah, that's me. I speak for God, and actually I've got a message right now. Could you go get Ahab?" And Obadiah was like, this isn't good, because if I go and get Ahab, he's mad at you, by the way. If I go get Ahab and I bring him back here, and then you're not here, he's not going to be very happy with me. So Elijah's like, "Don't worry, I'll be here. I need to see him. I have a message from God." So Obadiah goes across and finds Ahab and says, "Elijah's over here." So Ahab, who was feeling the effects of no rain, couldn't even feed his horses, his animals. There's just nothing left to eat. And it was pretty desperate. Things were dry, I mean, bone dry, crackling dry. Nothing green, nothing was growing. There wasn't enough water to drink. It was pretty bad. So Ahab gets over to Elijah really quick and is like, it's you. You started this. And Elijah's like, "Well, it was just a messenger from God. I think really you started this. But God has some things he'd like to say. So can you get your prophets of Baal together, and I'll bring me, and we'll go to the top of Mount Carmel, and we'll let God do his thing." And so Ahab's like, "Okay." Now I think Ahab probably wanted to kill Elijah. I mean, he was mad. But Elijah was the one that had the keys to getting it to rain again, because he had that contact with God. So Ahab didn't kill Elijah. Instead, he got his 450 prophets of Baal together, and there were other prophets of Azahara, another God-type person, and he brings them up to the top of Mount Carmel, and a lot of the Israelites who are like, "We want some rain," they all come up as well. There's a lot of people there. And they're all kind of a little bit mad at the situation, and might be blaming Elijah for that just a little bit. So Elijah says, "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to build an altar here, which you're going to build and put together. And then you're going to ask your prophets to come and ask Baal to light the altar. We're not going to light it. But we're going to build another altar here, and that's going to be for the God of heaven, and he'll light this one. So go ahead and build your altar and ask Baal to light it." So they built the altar, stones, wood, the sacrifice. And the 450 prophets were like, "Okay, knock, knock, knock. Baal, light it." It did not get lit. So they danced around, all the way around the altar. "Whoa, please, Baal, please, will you light our altar?" The altar did not get lit. So they had knives, and they thought, well, if Baal knew how serious they were about lighting this altar, then maybe he would. So they started cutting themselves with knives and dancing with knives. Woo! Please, Baal. But nothing. They did this all day, and at the end of the day, Elijah, who's just been sitting there and watching this, goes, I think I know what the problem is. Baal can't hear you. You need to sing and dance louder. Maybe cut yourself some more. So they did. They're like, Baal, please light the altar. But nothing. Well, at the end of the day, they were worn out. They were exhausted. They were just done. I mean, the altar was a mess. Elijah's altar became a mess. And they're just like, oh, I need to take a nap. So Elijah fixes his altar. And then he says, hey, you guys over there, could you build a trench around this altar? A good-sized trench, a ditch. And after they dug it around and everybody's watching, it's like, what's he going to do? And he says, that water there, pour the water in those jars, pour it over the altar. And water was kind of a scarce thing when there hasn't been rain for 3 years. And they pour water over the altar, and Elijah's like, let's do it again. Pour some more water over the altar. So they poured some more water over the altar. And Elijah's like, it's not really wet enough. Because, when you're trying to light a fire, wet is just awesome. So he says, put a third lot of water on. So they put a third lot of water on. There's water all over the altar. The water filled the ditch around the altar. It was soaking wet. And then Elijah kneels down and says, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, will you hear my prayer today and show these people that you are the real God? Amen. And with that, Elijah looked up to heaven, and lightning came down and blew up the whole altar. And everybody was like, wow. And they all said, the God in heaven is the one true God. I don't know why God holds back the rain sometimes, or why our lives get difficult sometimes. But maybe God is just looking for your attention because he likes you. And he likes hanging out with you, and he likes it when you pray to him and talk to him. He just likes that because he likes you. I don't know if that's what God was doing, or if he was trying to teach the Israelites a lesson, or if he was trying to teach Elijah a lesson, because Elijah had some stuff to learn after that too. Maybe it was God's way of protecting his people, looking after them. I don't always know what God's up to exactly, because he's really smart, but he's also really awesome. And I really like hanging out with him. And I love that he loves hanging out with me. Yeah. God sent the rain after that. Lots of it. And the people knew where the rain came from, just in case they might have forgotten. Hey, thanks for listening to this story. Next time, I'm going to tell a story about how Elijah, he took a trip. Like a really cool trip. But that's for next time. Right now, thank you for joining me. I'll be back in about a month with our next story. Take care, you guys. Bye.